comes Miss Amphipolis. I don't actually know anything about Miss America or about pageants in general. Surprise, they were not really part of my life. I mean, the closest I ever came was when I was at home for Christmas and I watched Toddlers and Tiaras, and it was kind of the most horrifying thing I'd ever seen, and I never want to do that again. But this is not that. This is Xena Warrior Princess does a pageant show. And in fact, it's kind of surprisingly awesome. But we're not there yet. We are in fact starting the episode with a beautiful seaside stroll for Xena and Gabrielle. There's not really much of a point to this seaside stroll except to exist as a giant exposition dump. Basically, they got this call from Salmonius. Okay, technically, could not have been a call because of the whole ancient Greece thing. So let's just say it was a carrier pigeon with a scroll. A Xena scroll. Oh, look at that. Harkening back to old episodes. Continuity? Pwned. Right, so apparently they've come to this place because Salmonius asked them to come, and Xena explains to all of us, and Gabrielle, that there used to be a war here, like, a year ago, and it was really, really bad. But kind of in the middle of her explanation, they get interrupted by a bevy of beautiful maidens who literally come jogging down the beach in Baywatch slow motion. I don't even really have the words to describe it. I mean, boobtastic? Maybe that's the word, boobtastic. It is very boobtastic. And they are being pursued by some dudes, I guess. I'm not entirely sure why, just because dudes are jerks. But luckily, Xena is there to fight them off by flinging clams at them, because why the hell not? Eventually, Salmonius comes up when all the fighting is done and explains the rest of our exposition dump, which is basically that the war leaders from the war that is over both have girls in the pageant, and they are using the pageant as an excuse to get the war started again, and things keep going wrong, and so somebody needs to go undercover. And surprise, it's going to be Xena, because this is her show. So yes, Xena is going to go undercover as a contestant in the Miss Known World pageant, which is basically my favorite joke in this entire episode. I didn't really understand what they were saying until the very end, and then I kind of lolled. IRL. So yes, Xena's going to be in the pageant, and Gabrielle is going to be her sponsor with a geographically untraceable accent, calling herself the Marquesa. Basically, it's kind of an excuse to let Gabrielle do her over-the-top thing, and it is marvelous, as it always is with Gabrielle. And then we basically have 45 minutes of misdirection and red herrings being flung at us like Xena flinging clams, basically. Because there's a weird and slightly creepy matron of the pageant. I don't know what she's there to do. She kind of maybe has an ancient Greece clipboard or something. I don't know. She seems like she should have a clipboard. But she basically comes around every so often and is kind of weird and overbearing and sneery. And then she leaves, and it's a little weird. So, you know, suspicious. And then we have another person to suspect, because Xena goes to hang out in this sauna with the other girls, because that's what you do. And there's a very intense girl, and very intense girl has like a mysterious scar. And that's never explained, or if it was, I wasn't paying attention. But she's weird, and she's intense, and then all of a sudden Xena is locked in the sauna. No! And I don't know, there's weird stuff in there about like her opening a teeny window that's like this big. And I don't think Xena can fit through that window. And I'm not entirely sure what that was supposed to be about, but I mean, she gets out eventually and in time to compete in round 1. So, yay! Yeah, I really thought it was going to be a bigger deal, but then there's Xena, like, presenting herself as a contestant, wearing a gold lame version of her regular costume, and she's blonde. And then we come to the first moment in this show, which pleasantly surprised me, with how generally well it was handled. I mean, it wasn't perfect, but it was pretty darn near close, because it turns out that the contestant who lost Xena into the sauna was in fact Miss Artifice, which is kind of an awesome name. And Miss Artifice, as it turns out, is a drag queen. And they really kind of handle this with a lot of respect. I mean, it's not perfect, but it's pretty damn good. And spoilers, and they never disrespect her, like, at any point in these proceedings. And there's no weird sissism or anything. Like, she's just there, and she's awesome. And I'm just like, damn, Xena, this is unexpected. That's pretty cool. And then I just keep getting pleasantly surprised. surprised because they didn't do a pretty damn good job of like turning all of these other pageant finalists into actual layered characters. And I apologize because I feel like I'm way too surprised that this show is doing things right, and I feel like that makes me seem like I'm really undervaluing this show or not giving it enough credit, and if that is true, I apologize. Basically, this episode does a really good job balancing the idea that like people are complex and there's a lot more to them than you think there is, and if they're beautiful, maybe you shouldn't just think that they want to be considered beautiful, maybe there's more to them, but on the other hand, if somebody wants to be a pretty girl, that's okay too. Like, it kind of values all of these choices, and I'm just like, that's like feminism doing it right. Like, well done, Xena. That's awesome. I love it. And I'm grinning like a loon because it just makes me really happy when, like, people get it right. It's a little weird because at the same time the show is being, like, really super awesome, it also kind of forgets to give them actual names because we only ever hear them as, like, Miss Whatever, and that's fine, but it's just like, if the whole point is that they're more than, like, a little one-dimensional person, maybe we should give them a real name too. But, you know, that's just my suggestion. Take it or leave it. Whatever. As you can tell, I'm really not that concerned with the plot because the plot is very flimsy in this episode, but I did really enjoy the talent section of this pageant because, of course, there has to be a goofy talent section in any time that you choose to set your story in a pageant. Because in this pageant, we have, like, a harp, and then we have a ribbon dancing, and then we have snake charming. And I don't know why they're snake charming. All I know is that it ends up with Xena wearing a snake like it's a feather boa. Because basically the person who's trying to sabotage this pageant keeps stepping it up and stepping it up. And so it really is kind of time to bring it all together. And so a mysterious person is seen clubbing all the sponsors over their heads, and they end up all tied up under a table conveniently, while Xena goes to confront the guy who's kind of running the whole pageant, who is Lord Clairol or something. It's very similar to that. I think it's like Claren, maybe? Clairon? Something like that. Anyway, he's got a very big mullet. And so Mr. Mullet confesses the whole plot within earshot of all the other sponsors, and yay! There's really not much more of a plot to this episode because the bad guy is defeated, and then we finally go to the end of the pageant, and Xena withdraws because Xena's just like, yeah, I'm Xena. We're not doing this anymore. And so one by one, all of the finalists start to drop out of this pageant until all that we have left is Miss Artifice, and she's just like, screw you! I'm totally taking this crown, and I'm gonna work it. And that's awesome. Golf clap. No ribbons were harmed during the production of this motion picture. However, several of them did suffer severe motion sickness.